Okay, everyone, we are live. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. We are celebrating International Women's Day. I'm honoured to have three amazing guests here with me today. We're talking about career stories, specifically within the financial services industry. And it's a space here for inspiration and for meaningful conversation. So the aims of the session today are to highlight the diverse experiences of women in the workplace, to learn from inspiring journeys of these three accomplished women, and to gain valuable insights on navigating challenges, building confidence, and achieving success. We also want to spark conversation about creating more inclusive and equitable workplaces for all. So please do put your comments in the chat. We'd love to hear from you some questions or just your thoughts in terms of inclusivity and also your career journey. So please do get stuck in, get engaged, and leave those comments in the chat box. So before we dive in, I'd love to introduce my guests. Firstly, Andrea Roberts, who is the National Account Manager at Hodge. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you very much indeed. And it's great to join your session, Atlyn. Thanks for the invite.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to hearing all about your career story. And Aleka, who is a financial advisor with Money Sprite. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Fabulous. And also I'm excited to hear your stories as well, Aleka, about your career as a financial advisor and many more things that I know that you do as well. And Katy, it's an absolute pleasure, head of decision science. And I'm sure everyone wants to hear all about that role and what it entails. It's a pleasure to have you too.
Thank you, Atlyn.
You are welcome. Okay, guys, so let's get stuck in. So the first question really is about your careers. I really want to find out more, I'm sure everybody else does, about your career journey. What were those key moments that shaped your path? So let's start with Andrea. Tell us about your career story.
Gosh, well, my career started a very, very long time ago, back in 1994. And I'm sure lots of you on the call weren't even alive in 1994. But I fell into financial services as I hear stories all the time about, I didn't actually I planned to fall into financial services, but I did after graduating with a degree in hotel management. So, I spent a year in hotel management and then the rest of my career has been in financial services. And it was just simply circumstances at the time, personal circumstances. I needed a job and the biggest employer in my local town was a financial services employer. So I actually started on the telephone doing prospecting or cold calling, as we call it today, selling personal loans. So that then took me, I was there for quite some time, actually. That then took me through a really quite good career with that business, through to team management, management of department, training, etc., underwriting. And then I had my first maternity leave. But back in them days, maternity leave was a little bit different because I only got 12 weeks. Can you imagine having a baby and having to go back to work after 12 weeks? So back I went after 12 weeks. And I suppose it is then quite a big, real uphill struggling at home with a tiny baby. And obviously trying to drag your career in the direction that you wanted it to go. But yeah, so I was quite fortunate, actually. I did I did climb the ladder, and then met my husband, and we decided to come out of the corporate world and set up our own business as mortgage brokers. But that was back in 2007. Now, I'm sure you're gonna, you'll know exactly what I'm going to say. Of course, 2008 then happened quite quickly. I then had under the further 2 small children at home, and overnight our business went. We had a really nice, quite a really good lifestyle, a nice business. The day after, literally, we couldn't place a case anywhere, and lenders were pulling offers left, right, and centre. So I had to go back out into the corporate world. So I went into the world of mutual building societies. So went back full time again. I suppose really a lot of my career has been spent juggling with kids. Me and my husband, trying to juggle finances, juggling kids and juggling career paths, basically. So went back into the corporate world, into mutual building societies, and just worked up the ladder. And went into intermediaries probably about 10 years ago, which it then really started to take off. And I must say, I work for a great business. I have a great job. I love my job now, and I feel very, very fortunate to do what I do. But it's taken me all of those years to get here. So, yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
What a story, ups and downs, but also it sounds like you are extremely experienced, Andrea. You've covered so many different aspects of financial services, so I'm sure you are a major asset to your business. Thank you so much for sharing that story. Well, it's not a story, real life.
Yeah, it is. It's real life, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, Aleka, please tell us a bit about your career journey.
Bit like Andrew, actually, I fell into financial services. So I was working in retail shops and decided that I no longer wanted to work weekends because I had a Saturday job forever. And I thought if I go to the bank, that's Monday to Friday, I can rave all weekend. It's going to be great. So that's how I actually went into banking and was the cashier. But I had loads of experience from retail management positions and sales. So for me, it was just a different product. Instead of skirts and trousers, we now got loans and credit cards. So that's how it started. Went into the bank, and back then the job market was very fluid. You could walk in and out of a job. So I did the role for a bit. Then I asked for leave for holiday, couldn't get no holiday. So I left, went away, came back, and I did different stints in insurance, telesales, all kinds of different roles that actually now I can see marketing that actually built little bits of experience that I could keep carrying forward. And then I went back into banking, had my son, and thought, right, I need a job. I went back into banking, was a cashier for 3 months, then got promoted to personal banker because I was so chatty with the clients, and I just kept learning the role. I think it was probably 4 months in that role. I saw a job for branch manager and thought, let me call up and find out what you need to have. And it was like, yeah, you've got to be in your current role for 18 months. And I was like, okay, thank you. And then I said, the person said, what is it that made you call? And I explained all my previous experience, got an interview, actually got the role and was in there. And I thought, I've got a son, but everything is experience. So I then decided to do my CMAP qualifications in the bank. I did my CMAP qualifications. I passed. I became a mortgage advisor. And most of the other experience I got just fell off the back of that. So a lot of my clients were in East London. They were self-employed shop owners. They were coming in. We had to assess their income, and I couldn't read their accounts. And they didn't understand it. They were like, oh, you have to ask your accountant. So I decided to take some money from the bank because you got personal development. And I went to college in the evening and I did bookkeeping and accounts and got the accounting qualifications. By that time, my son was 2, 3 years old in nursery. It was really hard working full time, dropping your son off at nursery, rushing to work, doing a full day's work, picking them up. You get all the mum guilt. You're missing everything. You're missing first steps, first words. And I was a single mum as well. So it was really challenging. And I said, by the time he goes to school, my dream, I think we were on a training program and they said, where would you want to be in 10 years' time? And I wrote it down. And I said, yeah, in 10 years' time, I'd like to be a self-employed advisor with my own business. It was a massive dream at the time. And somehow in 2006, I decided to go self-employed. He was 4 years old. And I said, no, when he goes to school, I want to do the pickups and be available because the stats in Hackney for young boys is not good. So I thought there's only me. So I need to be available and be present for him. So that made me go self-employed. I left mortgages and said I wasn't going to do them again. I set up a bookkeeping and accounts practice and did some accounting qualifications. I saw that there was a gap in the market, that everybody had a business. They understood their business. They needed accounts doing, but they didn't understand what it was. So I decided to fill that gap as the go-between. I could speak the gibberish of the accountant and I could speak normal language, and just did a consultancy. So that got me quite a few clients. And then naturally, I still had the same phone number. People were phoning me up. My 5-year fix is coming to an end. Can you help me? My clients were like, you're a mortgage advisor. Can you help me? So that really pushed me back in. I thought, okay, there's an opportunity here to make some extra money. I know what it is. So I came back in the industry. And yeah, so that was 2000 and probably 11 at that time. And I've just kept going, learning the industry. I'm very inquisitive, so I don't like to say, oh, you're just a mortgage advisor, you do this. Literally every client that comes, I'm looking for somewhere to place them. How can I get across their barriers? What's the problem? There must be a way. Yeah, and that's how it's gone, and we're here now. And different things, I think everything that I've done has been informed by my clients. So my clients come for a need, and I'm always, don't lie, so always say, I actually don't know, but can I come back to you within 24 hours? So that would make me go away, research, and it just keeps building your knowledge. If you always, I've really disheartened. I remember the first time buyers that came in, they said, oh yeah, we found our dream house, this amount, and yeah, we want to buy it and we're going to move in. And they was telling me all their dreams, because I asked them to tell me about the house. And then when I did the affordability check and told them that they couldn't actually afford that house and couldn't get their house, just watching them sink in the chair, it broke my heart. And usually they'll just walk out the door. So I thought, how can I help these people who are not quite ready? Instead of them just walking out the door and be completely deflated and think that their dream cannot happen, how can I educate them to get to that stage? And that's where the curiosity for what I do now started. So yeah, here we are.
Wow, another fascinating career path. And again, it seems that the trend is that you're picking up different things as you go along, and transferable skills to kind of set the path where you are today, and continuing to learn. Thank you so much, Aleka, for sharing that. It's really interesting. Okay, Katy, on to you. Please tell us a bit about your career story.
Yeah, no problem. It's also 3 for 3, fell into financial services. So I did a maths degree, maths and philosophy degree, and then moved to Cardiff and was like, I need a job. I now have rent. So started temping. Added up the worked on exam papers, like added up the marks on exam papers and checked that the teacher like added up right. That's like a whole job. So I did that for a few weeks, then worked in data entry for a car finance company, and was chatting to a manager some point after work, and I said, oh, I've got a maths degree, and he went, okay, like, but you speak really well to people, you don't seem like you're good at maths. I was like, okay, cheers, like I don't look like a mathematician. And as it happened, there was a role that had just opened in the pricing team. I had no idea what pricing was, but he said, we've got 2 weeks left of your temp contract, do you want to just go and finish it there, and they'll treat that like a long interview. So I did an interview process, but they really used that 2 weeks of temping with them. And yeah, so I didn't know what pricing was at that point. So that's working out how much you should charge your customers, what the interest rate's going to be on a car finance loan. Did that for a couple of years, went into mortgages for a couple of years in credit risk. So I've kind of stayed pretty specialist, and I've been credit risk for pretty much all of it until recently. And it's very much, we were talking earlier, doing math stuff in finance. That's kind of like my shtick. But I think the through line for me has always been, yes, doing the math stuff, but also I can talk to people. I am able to speak non-maths language. I'm able to speak non-statistical model language. I went and worked for Lloyd's Banking Group for a couple of years, and there I built credit risk models, but learned how to engage and talk to people who don't speak that kind of language. And so my path has been very much a kind of all the way, I started with maths and philosophy, right, which is like super technical, super not technical. Can I write essays and philosophize on stuff, and that has just followed me all the way through, which is effectively being that bridge between that kind of super technical side and not. So yeah, the last 6 months or so, I've been setting up a decision science team in a specialist mortgage lender, and that looks like data science, cool math stuff. What does it look like to support the business in making better decisions? And we're not sat in an ivory tower doing something really fancy that doesn't actually benefit anyone. But what does it look like to bring that benefit into? You're trying to make this decision. What data do you need? What information do you need? What analysis can we do to make that a better decision, to make that a more informed decision? So yeah, it's really fun. What I do, I love my job. But yeah, it's maybe not quite as it's been quite focused. But yeah.
Oh, brilliant, Katy. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like you're the translator, right? So all the stats and techie stuff you make
I try.
into language for the rest of us, right?
Yeah, I try.
Yeah. And it's clear that, you know, you love what you do. And that kind of brings us on to the next question, which I'm going to ask Andrea. You also mentioned that you love what you do. And I love that trend because I know Aleka loves what she does as well. So I think this must be a thing. If you're passionate about what you do, it really helps you to continue to have a really positive career. But Andrea, and what motivates you to get up in the mornings and pursue your goals? You said you love your job, and what is it about it that you love?
Yeah, now, first of all, I do think it's really, really important that in order to get where you want to be, or where you're comfortable at being at, you've got to really enjoy what you do and who you're working with. So, bit of a cliche, but it's the people. So it's specifically the people that I work with, but not just internal colleagues. I suppose it's external as well. So my job is very, very varied, out and about all the time. Absolutely does keep me on my toes. And also I do a lot of collaboration, so with other lenders, etc., coming together. So it's not just the team within the lender that I work with, it's the greater team in the industry that really does make it extra special. But yeah, so, you know, every day is different. Some days, like today, for example, I've spent the whole day at home, but tomorrow I get in my car at 7 a.m, drive to Manchester, and then drive down to London for an event in London, and then back home Friday afternoon, Friday evening, and then it all starts again next week. So it's varied, it's exciting, and it's great, you know. But I am such a believer in it. To do well, you've really got to enjoy what you do.
Yeah, that's great. And that sounds like a real motivation to get up and do that, because for some people, driving to Manchester and then to London wouldn't be enjoyable for some, right?
But do you know what? If I would have hated it, I think, 15 years ago, it just wouldn't have been the job for me. You know, I couldn't have done the job, you know, and just simply because juggling all the time. But, you know, I suppose I've really come into my own, I think, over the last 10 years, as I've said. You know, it's taken me a long time to get here. But it's just circumstance, isn't it? You know, we do what we need to do. Like Aleka, you know, you do what you need to do to make sure, you know, that you provide for your family, etc. But yeah, so I do feel very, I suppose, content in what I do, but it's taken a long time to get here.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that. I'm really pleased to hear that. Contentment is also a wonderful thing to have in your career, in your job. So Aleka, you mentioned a bit about something that excites you in terms of helping those who maybe are not fully aware of the options they have in terms of their finances. But what excites you most about working in the financial services industry?
I think I've written here people, community, and legacy. So the people that are in the industry, nobody's the same. Everybody's different. So if you take your time to listen to people's stories, as we are now, you'll learn so much more. Being a mortgage advisor and doing protection, you're meeting so many people. You could have 5 appointments in one day. You meet somebody who's earning 200 grand in one appointment, and the next one's earning 20. So you get to see different people's lives. And I always say, if you were to die tomorrow, what legacy would you have left? So how would somebody have felt? Have you made a difference in their life? Have you made a difference in your own life? So that's what excites me about the industry. It's never the same. Every client, every decision you make, every application you do is different, and it's not, yeah, you're going to get paid, but for me it's not about the money. It's literally about what do you do for other people. So I love it when someone sends a text and it's a picture of a front door, look, our first house, and they're excited. So for us it's just a mortgage application, but for them it's a life dream. Remember, I got a text the other day when the interest rates went up, and a girl literally texted me and said, thank you so much for doing a 5-year fix, because I'm watching the news, I'm hearing all these stories, and I literally would have died. Like, we've got a roof over our head and I'm still okay and I'm still saving. Like, that made me cry. Like, wow, she actually had the thought to come back and say thank you. So that for me is the legacy, actually making a difference in people's lives. People's like financial services isn't that boring, but no, everything is what you make it. So I definitely think it's about the people more than anything else.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, because, you know, often people think that financial services maybe isn't such a sexy or exciting career, or very diverse. But I think today the three of you have shared very different sides to the financial services industry, but also kind of making it very relatable and human. I think all of you have touched on the human aspect of your roles. And I think even, you know, for us, you know, helping people succeed is one of our kind of values. But I think that, you know, being able to touch and see and get really close to the customers must be really rewarding. So thank you for
sharing.
I
think back in the younger days when I was just training, I remember one of the managers says, remember, people buy from people. Yeah. So it doesn't matter how great your product is, how big you are, if they don't relate to you or you don't relate to them, you'll never get that signature on the page. So you have to remember it's the person in front of you that's most important at all times.
Yes, that was great advice. And on that note, if anyone's got any questions, we've got one comment in there just saying great story to begin with, which I think was Andrea. If anyone else has got any questions for any of the panelists, please do share them in the chat and we can come back to them later. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question, which is kind of looking back. And I'm going to ask Katy this question. If you could give your 18-year-old self one piece of advice, what would that be?
Yeah, it's just one that was interesting to think about. And I think it's trust my instincts. I think generally like lack self-confidence. It doesn't look like it, but I do. And I think I've spent a lot of my time being swayed. People like to try and, oh, well, you should do it like this, and it's actually going like, trust yourself. You have good instincts, and when you think this doesn't feel right, or that, like, I mean, I work in data, right? So it's a lot, I'm thinking very much in terms of problem solving, or like having a good idea, or what if we try it this way, and trust yourself, like try, speak up, like test it out. Because I think, yeah, that's one of the things that I'm developed more and more, is actually going, oh, I thought that like something happens and I go, oh, that doesn't quite feel right, but I don't speak up, and then it goes exactly what I thought, and I'm like, oh, I kind of wish I had. And it's been developing that actually my instinct is good, and then bringing the data alongside that to like prove the point is then the next step of what I tend to do. But yeah, a bit more confidence maybe.
Yeah, great advice for the 18-year-old there. Trust your instinct. I certainly agree with that as well, and also feel that many times I've doubted myself and realised in the end that I've been correct. So yeah, great advice there. Andrea, I'm going to ask you the same question. If you could speak to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give yourself?
Do you know, I think that the best piece of advice for me personally would be never settle for second best, because I think sometimes along the way I probably have settled and maybe because, you know, my journey has been long and my journey has been up and down with all different things that have come in sideways. So yeah, absolutely, never settle for second best. And probably be bolder, but it's not always possible for somebody to be bold at the age of 18. When you're 18, you're not bold, are you? You don't know what you don't know, do you? Do you know what I mean? In fact, I have a daughter who's about to be 18, and if I said to her, be bold, she would, she'd be like, well, you know, what are you saying that for? Of course I'm bold. But in order to, I suppose it's just, don't suffer fools gladly, isn't it? That's the thing. And unfortunately, sometimes we do have to shout a little bit louder to get our voices heard. You know, and we have to shout in the right direction as well. And I think that we've all, you know, we've all demonstrated that as well. But yeah, it's be bold, be brave, and never settle for second best. That's what I would say.
Oh, brilliant advice, Andrea. I hope your soon-to-be 18-year-old certainly listens to the advice that you share with her, because it is good advice. I mean, I do find, though, that I sound like an old lady now, but the young people of today are a slightly different breed and can be quite bold in different ways. And so for my daughter, well, I've got two daughters. One of them is 23, one of them is 14. But I'm like, you can be bold, but be bold in the right ways, because sometimes I think it's just misdirected, the boldness. Yeah. And if you put your energy into doing this, you know, it take you really far. But thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to move on to the next question now. This is for Aleka. You know, you mentioned a lot of really positive things about your career and some of the ups and downs. But what are the challenges you've faced in your career, and how did you overcome them?
I think one of them, well, yeah, one was definitely in my role as a advisor, was lead generation. That's a massive one for everybody. And the second one is visibility, because there is so many mortgage advisors in the industry. How do you stand out? So they actually went side by side. They go and speak to your friends, family, neighbors. That's one of the most scariest things. It's easier to speak to a stranger than it is people who already know you or have known you from you've been in a nappy coming up, like, how dare you come and try and speak to me about money? So yeah, that was a really big challenge for me, was getting out there. And even though everybody always says, oh, you're great, you did do this, I literally would come home and be sick or have complete nerves beforehand, because we all have to overcome our internal fears, right? So yeah, the lead generation and visibility, that's how I started doing events and getting out there and speaking to people. So first of all, it was talking to allies, people I knew with different community groups that had things on. Instead of trying to create it, had things on. Oh, you've got a women's group, could I come and speak to them about protection, or can I come and speak to them? So I'd find the common ground and say, yeah, can I come and speak to them about this? Because then you're in a safe environment, or safer. It's a smaller group and you can go in, give them some information, use Katy's data science and say, look, this is what's going on, and this is how you overcome it. So it was lead generation that made me look for barriers, and then say to people, look, this is the barrier out here, here's the problem, but you can actually work around this or get over this by having this product or by doing this. And then you're in a room with probably, I would say 20, 30 people, but I remember I walked in a room and I thought I was going to be one of the speakers, and there was 80 guests, and I looked at my colleague, he's like, it's too late, the doors locked, like I wanted to die. And just telling people, look, this is what the risks are, this is what the threats are on yourself, because most people don't actually know, and says this is how you can solve it. So you're in a room, you're speaking to people, is quite friendly and relaxed, but they get to know your personality, they get to know your expertise, and they get to spend time with you. So straight away people will come up to you and afterwards say, can I book an appointment? And you'll just find that your diary's full. So for me, it was a cheaper option, being a single mum, juggling and having you know, you're watching your financial expenses as well. It was a cheap way to go out, get visibility, and this was before social media as well. So I think I've kind of stuck in that pattern to get in a room where people are, and then they'd book appointments. I could then follow on with what I talked about on a one-to-one, but then expand it further and look for other opportunities. And once you get that relationship with people, they start to refer on, and it just builds from there. So yeah, I think the challenge is visibility, and don't be scared. If you're going to do it, just do it anyway. What's the worst that could happen? And usually your biggest fear doesn't actually happen. You'll turn around and thought, oh, that was actually okay, like, oh, I'll do it again. So yeah, once you step out there, it just starts to get, I'm not going to say easier because it doesn't, but you get familiar and you get comfortable. If you've done it once, the next time you'll be scared again, but I did it before, what did I do then, what worked well, and just keep evaluating and putting yourself out there.
I think that is a brilliant advice, because I think, putting yourself forward into that uncomfortable zone is where you learn and where you grow. But also I find that if I'm going to be speaking in public, once you know your stuff, I was going to say the other word, but once you know your stuff, literally you can't go wrong. So yeah, I would warn anyone, if you are going to go and speak in public, just make sure you've done your homework and you know what you're talking about, because once you've got that knowledge, then you should be fine, no matter how nervous you get. Okay, Katy, on to you. Please tell us about any challenges you've faced in your career and how you've overcome them.
Yeah, it was again just one that I was thinking about earlier, and it was about, I think that I have developed, like, the positive side is I feel like I've developed an ability to influence people, because I think I started young. I've been in my career 10 years, and I think I haven't been taken on face value a lot of the time. So if I'm like, I don't think this is the right thing, or I think this is the way to do it, I feel like I've always had to kind of fight for it and persuade and convince, rather than necessarily somebody going, oh yeah, okay, like, she knows what she's talking about, she's well educated and she's clever, and like, great, I'll listen to her. It's always been like, I feel like I've always had to kind of fight for that position. I feel like I have been set up for that my entire life. I'm the youngest of three, my two older brothers, and like I'm good at like fighting for, like, no, I deserve a place here. But it means that rather than it, I learned quite quickly in business that fight isn't necessarily the way that you get old white men to listen to you. It's through influencing and persuading and coming at it sideways and like, have you thought about this thing? And I think that the further in my career I've got at this point, maybe I could just go, well, no, this is the way that we're going to do it, and people would listen to me. But actually I still influence and I still persuade and convince, and I think that's a positive side to the fact that I feel like I've always been that kind of, I don't feel like I've necessarily been taken on face value. Like, okay, we're just going to trust what she says. So yeah, but hopefully that's the kind of positive spin to it, right? I feel like I've got skills that male counterparts or other people my age like don't necessarily have.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point to make, because I feel that sometimes as a woman, you feel that others are taken on face value, even though they may not be as, experienced or talented or intelligent as yourself. And so, having to find ways to overcome that seems a bit unfair, but it is essential in terms of getting on in business. So, thank you for sharing that, Katy. Just going back to Aleka, in terms of, your fear of public speaking, someone's asked a question in terms of, what helped you to understand and overcome that fear? I know you said you still have it, but any tips on how you can overcome that?
You know what? I think it wasn't until I got mentored. So when I got mentor, they can actually see. So people will see more of you than you see of yourself. So your fears are always going to be something that you think is going to happen. But when I got mentorship, I realized they actually drill it down. What are you scared of? What's the worst thing to overcome? And then you start to realize that actually fear is just success turned inside out. So yeah, definitely mentorship and allyship as well. Having colleagues around me that championed me and actually motivate me. I would be vulnerable enough to say, I'm actually so nervous. They're like, why are you scared? So it is actually being honest with myself and saying, yeah, I am scared, and then drilling down, why are you scared? You've done this a million times, you know your stuff, just get on. So mentorship for me was definitely a key thing, because if you only know what you only know, and if you get mentored by somebody that's done it before, they've been through the same things, and they can give you tips on how to overcome, what you should do, how you should stand. All those little things actually help. So you're always going to be fearful, and I would also say if you're not fearful, something's wrong. So there has to be a balance. You can't get too big-headed or let things go to your head that you don't have any fear and you turn up and you're all cocky, because that will come out in a different way. So nerves are good and fear is good, but yeah, mentorship, allyship, and studying, always look to be better than you currently are.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm happy you asked that question. Great. And if anyone has any other questions, do please pop them in the chat there. Okay, so the next question is going to be for Andrea. And we spoke a bit about some of the things that women have to do in the workplace, when kind of working alongside men. And so I'd like to ask you, how have you navigated working in a sector, obviously financial services, that is dominated by men? How have you navigated that?
I suppose early on in my career, the people at the top of the tree, it was very, very top heavy with males. It wasn't, you very rarely found a woman in a leadership position. The women were probably the team managers, the trainers, etc. And the leadership positions were very much filled with men. But what I would say, though, and particularly for me in my journey over recent years, it is becoming more and more equal. So you do see more women in leadership positions. But for me, it was very much getting an advocate. So, having somebody who actually listened to what you said, and, a lot of the time I do have quite a bit to say. And I'd like to think that a lot of the time is quite constructive. But it is having that advocate rather than being in the right place at the right time, and having somebody that will sit and listen to you and then believe in you. And like Aleka said, will mentor you and help you progress that way. So where I am at the moment, we've got quite a nice equal balance of men and women. But that's just in my business. Outside of the wider business, then that's where it does get a little bit more mixed. However, that said, it is about being bold, isn't it? Being bold, being brave, get out there, and try introduce yourself, etc. So yeah, it's different for different people, isn't it, with regards to different experiences that they've had and different roles. So I would say my experience, it is changing, and it is, and that's just simply for me, probably at the stage that I'm at in my career. But it has been hard trying to overcome it as we've come through the years.
Yeah, thank you. And we also had a point from Jan just saying a similar thing in terms of, there hasn't always been that diversity in terms of gender split within leadership positions, but it is changing slowly. And, I really look forward to seeing more women, becoming leaders in business, not just in terms of CEOs, but on boards, and really letting us see that diversity across the board in terms of financial services. So hopefully in time we will start to see that. Yeah. Did anybody else want to add a comment there before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I was going to say, we say that there is a lot of men because that's the way that it always has been, but it is slowly changing. And there were a lot of women in financial services, but mostly in admin roles, not in mostly in support roles, but not in frontline advice or heads. Or I literally go and seek out heads of now and just smile every time I see a woman at the top. But inside that as well, where we've been had to push and fight to get there, sometimes those behaviors can be misconstrued. And I think the data says that women are bullied 70% of the time by other women. So we need to be championing them coming up, so that when they get to the top, they understand that it's companionship and not competition, because when most women say they got bullied or they got held back, it's not necessarily by a man. So we need more allyship and more development on the way up. It's not I'm made it, I'm here, I don't want another, because you can get that only syndrome where you're at the top and you're going to be intimidated by another woman coming up because there are so few. So I think it is changing across the board, but that's one of the things that we actually need is to know that once you get there, men will champion each other, women are less likely to champion each other, and we need to see more of that so that it can level out.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I do feel that sometimes, and I've seen this, that women who are leaders would sometimes take on characteristics that would be seen and considered to be more masculine, and then that is almost used against them. But they've developed those skills to get where they are. And I feel that sometimes if you just break the surface, then there is a very supportive woman there. And so I just wouldn't say to judge women on the surface of how they do business, but to try to have those interactions. I guess everyone is different, but I have seen women judged much more harshly in terms of their characteristics than a man ever would be. And if it was the same characteristics in a man, they wouldn't be
celebrated. Yeah.
Exactly. So I guess we need to be kind to each other, whether we're on the top or wherever we are in the business, and give each other a bit of grace, I think. But I do think being supportive, which is what this discussion is all around, creating a supportive, safe space and inspiring and supporting each other. But yeah, brilliant discussion. We could probably have another chat just about that, I believe. But let's talk a bit about kind of confidence and success. I'm going to ask Katy this question. Because you touched on it before briefly. What does it mean to you to be confident in the workplace? And it ties into what I just said, actually, about women and being confident and how that can be labelled sometimes.
Yeah. I think, so confidence, like, it's really interesting that you said that about, putting on, like, masculine traits, right? Like, or being perceived as masculine, because we just copy what we see, right? So if all you see is male leaders at the top, then you're like, well, to be a leader, I need to be like that. And so I feel like it's not surprising that you take on the attributes of a leader if they're the only leaders that you see. So actually it's a really interesting one. Like, how do you even break that cycle, or how do you change? And I think, again, it comes, for me personally, it comes back to the, like, trust your gut, like bring some data alongside and go, I do think that this needs to be different, and keep pushing. And I mean, we talked like before this about, I was doing a presentation to the whole business, and it was about my team and what it looks like, with a little bit of a kind of TED talk in the middle of it. And I had a very clear vision for how I wanted to structure that talk. And it was a little bit, start with one bit and then sprinkle something else in and then and it was a bit all over the place, but I'm pretty chaotic as a person anyway. So that felt like me. It was what I was comfortable with. And I had a lot of, like, 3-4 men around me saying, no, you shouldn't structure it like that. You should do this bit first and then this bit, like, have really structured, and the confidence for me to just go, actually, no, like, I hear what you're saying. Awesome. And like I changed my presentation around 2 or 3 times, and I just kept on coming back to, like, it's just not me. Like, just because that's how somebody else would present it, and I'm sure that if they presented it like that, it would work really well for them, because that's who they are and that's how they present. But how do I present? And I think a lot of the confidence is coming back to, who am I? What am I good at? What are my strengths? Because there's lots of things that I am really not good at, but there's some things that I am good at. And actually it's so for me, it's the confidence comes from really trying to self-reflect. So rather than going, okay, well, that person's like this, so I need to be like that in order to be good or leader or whatever. It's like, actually, here are the things that I'm good at. I'm going to try and double down on that. And maybe I am a little bit chaotic in my communication style, but I feel like it can make it engaging and flowing and capture people's imagination. And so somebody else might present it and it's much more structured and much more easy to follow, but maybe people are less engaged. And so I'm going to choose my way and see how that goes, because it's an experiment. Life is an experiment. Data is an experiment. Like, it's all, well, just try, like, see what happens. And the confidence to not worry about failing. But that's maybe just more like work with my therapist that has helped, right? Like, it's okay to fail. And like, if anything, it's important to fail, because we learn the best from failing and then thinking about those things and moving forward. Sorry, it was a bit rambling.
No, it's perfect. And it just leads so nicely into the next question, which I'm going to ask Andrea. So like Katy just said, how do you advocate for yourself and take up space in your field, especially in your role? I do find that there does seem to be a lot of men to do that kind of field work. So how do you advocate for yourself and take up space, especially because you're trying to get attention, I guess, from the brokers in terms of your role, aren't you?
Yeah, and do you know what? I think over the years, for me, it's been knowledge. To be fair, I suppose, Aleka, if I came in to see you to talk about, products, etc., it is about knowledge. It's got to be about knowledge. And if you're presenting, if you are presenting to an audience, be it an audience of 5 or 85, it is all about the knowledge, because the one thing that I always have to keep in check and remind myself is I know a lot more about the subject that I'm talking about than my audience. So there is a question actually in the chat about imposter syndrome, and I think all of us would probably say yes, absolutely, we do struggle with imposter syndrome from time to time. And sometimes, like Katy said, you do have to stop. You've got to stop. You've got to look back and actually see what you have achieved. The knowledge that you have, you might put that knowledge across as in a different manner than somebody else, but that might be more engaging, more entertaining. Everybody has different skills, I think, that we all bring to the table. But it is all about self-belief, and I'm sure that we can't all sit here and think that we believe in ourselves every single, minute of the day that we're at home or we're at work or, in our personal life, etc. We would all suffer from, at some point, imposter syndrome. But it is about that allyship, isn't it? It's about having a mentor. It's about having somebody that can pull you through, and that can look at you and say, no, do you know what? You are doing a really, really good job. Just look at what you've done. Look at what you've achieved. And I think that's really, really important. But it's and sometimes, it's difficult as well to take praise on. Some people don't take praise very well. They go, oh, no, surely you're just making that up. But it is about self-belief and listening and learning. Every day is a school day.
Could I add to that imposter syndrome one? I found that finding somebody who is very, very trusted, who you trusted to give you an honest opinion, mentor or something like that, and ask them for what's the criticisms of me? What's the negative feedback? Because trust me, my inside critical voice is always going to be significantly worse than any negative that those people are going to say. And I found that if people give me praise, especially if I'm in that, I'm deep in imposter syndrome, I can't believe I'm here and I don't think I can do it. And why am I the person that's doing this thing? And all of that, in that kind of spiral. And it is seasons. I agree with Andrea. It's not for me all the time. But when I'm like that, I find actually somebody saying that here's the things that you could work on, and realizing they're being completely honest with me. And they're saying, here's all the things that you're doing well. Here's something that you could work on. And you're like, yeah, okay, that's much smaller than the absolute catastrophe that's in my head. For me, it would have been very counterintuitive to hear that advice in that. And it's find someone that you trust and that is going to give you balanced advice. And that isn't, it's that somebody you've got a good relationship with and who knows you in work. But I found that helps in that space is actually almost to hear the opposite of the you're doing a great job, because I don't hear it when I'm in that space. I'm like, well, I'm just convincing you that I'm good, but I'm not, kind of thing.
And I think you have to believe in where you are. If you're in a space, it's because you've worked bloody hard to get there. So hold on to that and actually say, actually, whenever that comes up, why am I here? What have I done here? You haven't blagged somebody, you haven't paid somebody, you're there on the merit of your work. So sometimes that's hard to see because we never see ourselves. So if somebody else has seen you, actually ask them, why did you choose me? What do you see? And that will just help your confidence build again, because you think, okay, yeah, I have been doing that. Because sometimes you're just getting on and living your life and doing the best that you can, but that's where amazing happens.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just pulling on a few things that I do believe, like what Katy said earlier and Aleka, that doing things your own way can be really helpful rather than listening and looking at externally always. Because someone also mentioned about being calm. Now, I find if I do things my own way, I will feel calm because it's me, it feels very natural and authentic, rather than trying to replicate or copy someone else's way of doing things. So I think that's a great point. So thank you for sharing it. Okay, we're coming towards the end now. I've got just 2 more questions. So if anyone else has got any other comments or feedback, do please keep sharing. I'm loving the comments in the chat there. So I'm going to ask Aleka this question. What are your key principles of achieving success in your career? And success can mean many different things. So it'd be great to understand what that means to you.
Okay, so first of all, as it is a male-dominated industry, when I was coming up, I remember I was in a company where I was the only female, and that was really hard because everybody's got a lot of, they've got a lot of ego. I've done this, and you might not be working the same as somebody else, or your figures might not be as high, or you might not have as much confidence. So what helped me was Maya Angelou's quote, which I always say, that success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. Your definition of success is going to be different to everybody else's. So you must never look across the way and think, oh, they're doing that, they're really successful, I need to do that, because your path is your path. So for me, it's always about setting goals, owning your mistakes, because if you can own your mistake and say, actually, I did that really poorly and I did that wrong, how can I improve? Ask for help when you need help. Don't sit there and try and do it yourself. Ask for help and build your work ethic. That will keep you going. If you're always constantly working hard, striving to be the best that you can possibly be, you're only as good as your last self. So if you've just done a major deal or you closed the major deal, excellent, great. But if you failed the next one, that's who you are at that point. So always be looking to improve and just keep going up. So I think every level that you get to is, don't take it to your head. And somebody put in the chat that negative feedbacks give us opportunities to change. I'm going to spin that on the head and say, was it constructive? Because there will always be somebody that says something bad and somebody will put you down, and jealousy and envy is a real thing. So you have to qualify where the comments are coming from. And if somebody's giving you constructive feedback, it won't be hurtful, it will be honest and true. You might take it as hurt first, but if you go away and actually think, what did that person actually say and what did they mean, you might actually say they were right, and that will help you on to the next stage. So you have to be able to take constructive feedback and throw out negative comments, or as Katy said, people always say, oh, I wouldn't have done it like that, you shouldn't have done it like that, but the results are there. So it doesn't matter if you would have done it this way or that way. That's my results. I've got the results the same. Everybody's going to get to the same point a different way. And if everybody did everything the same, it would absolutely be boring. So I just say that you've got to like what you do. If you don't like yourself and you don't like what you do, then you might as well stay in bed because it's pointless.
Yeah, that is such a great thing to say. And I think it kind of mirrors what Andrea said at the top of this conversation around loving what you do, but also loving yourself and loving the way you do things is so important. So that's a fantastic quote. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so the last question I'm going to ask Katy and Andrea, what would you give, and I'm asking Katy because I know that in terms of STEM and kind of maths, there's a real push to try and get more women into this role. But what advice would you give to other women aspiring to careers in your field?
Yeah. So I'm going into a maths GCSE class tomorrow. tomorrow morning and doing a talk with them about this. And my key message is what I wish I had heard at that time, but it is what I pursued, which is you don't have to be a certain way or look a certain way or be a certain type of person to do something that you love. If you really enjoy maths, you don't have to worry about, oh, but I look at mathematicians and I'm not like that, so I can't do that. It's like, no, if you love it, pursue it, keep trying, because if you love it, you're going to try really hard, and the harder you work, the better that you're going to be, right? So like it's if you love it, do it. And for me, I guess it's thinking about aspiring to careers in my field. I don't think very many people aspire to data science because they're like, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what credit risk was. I didn't know what pricing was. I didn't even know it was a thing. So it's like, just take the next step. If you don't know what you want to do, work out what it is that you love. Work out what it is that, I was 17, had to write a personal statement for uni, and school said, you get ready to write that personal statement. And I was talking to mum and I was like, I have to talk about things I like. I don't know what I like. So she said, okay, let's get a little diary. So it was one of those tiny little diaries, and every day just write one thing that you really enjoyed about that day, one thing that you like got really fired up. She was like, then we'll just look for patterns. We'll just look for what is it. And you sort of slowly but surely you find it's like, I did a maths assignment that I loved, or I did this. And I suddenly found the things that I loved because I couldn't articulate what I loved, but collect data, apparently. Like just find out what that is, because that's the most important thing. And then just take the next step. Okay, well, I really enjoyed that, so I'm going to do more of that. Now what? I think that feels like a 3-point for all of our careers is you kind of just follow your nose and take the opportunities where they're there and take the chance, take the risk. But if you love it, it's much easier to keep going and do the really hard days, do the really hard weeks, because there are those too, right?
100%. I love the fact that you were collecting data on yourself at 17 years old.
I didn't think about it as data at 17. In hindsight, that's what it was. I didn't have a spreadsheet. I have spreadsheets and stuff now.
Yeah,
but
brilliant.
actually, that's a really good tip for what we all should be doing now. My friend says at the end of every day, write down what you've achieved for that day. And I can tell you, if you've had the hellish of days and you've got to write what you've achieved for that day, you're like, I got up, got dressed. I remember I was saying to my friend, I got up, I got dressed. She's like, oh, you had clothes to put on. It's pulling out those positives out of what you don't actually see. So that's actually really good.
Yeah, brilliant. And I don't know if, Andrea, when you answer this question, if you can touch on mindset, because this is what the last question was around. But in terms of, for you, what advice would you give to women aspiring to a career in your field?
Well, I suppose financial services is such a vast industry, isn't it? There's so many different jobs, positions, etc., that use so many different skills. So I suppose it's a case of figuring out what you like to do, what you're comfortable doing, because what you're comfortable doing doesn't always go together. So, for example, I like to talk to people. I like to be out. I don't like to be in front of a computer 5 days a week, however many weeks of a year. I would much prefer to be out and about speaking to people. So I suppose my job has morphed from where I was to where I am now, just simply quite a natural progression, really, because this is what I like to do, and this is probably what I'm better at, rather than being, I suppose, in a head office, being in lots of business meetings like Katy, for example. But that spreadsheets would be my worst nightmare. To be fair. So it is all about looking at the different roles within the industry, figuring out what you like, what you're good at, maybe collecting data, maybe using a diary system, thinking of one thing every day. Okay, so today I did whatever the activity was. this is what I really, really enjoyed about it, and this is probably what I didn't enjoy about it. So how can I move forward with the bits that I did enjoy? Who do I need to speak to? Who do I need to engage with? And, you know, LinkedIn is a great thing as well. You know, if you find people or if you find yourself drawn to people's posts, etc., because you think they're interesting, exciting, or you want to find out a little bit more, just engage with them, send them a message. You know, just a little comment. Yeah, I really liked what you said. Tell me a little bit more about it. You know, you can either go so far as, right, okay, jump on a call. There's no reason why we can't all get together and mentor and be allyships with each other outside of our particular businesses, because we've got a really, really good community out there. And I think, you know, if you are looking and if you're trying to figure out what it is that you want to do in financial services, then it is communicate. And that's not always easy for people. But I think, you know, places like LinkedIn might be a really good place to start.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And that leads nicely into my closing statement, really. Thank you all for sharing so much about your careers and giving some fantastic advice with regards to what people can do to move forward, but also how they can face their challenges and to learn from their experiences in the financial services sector. But I would love to just pull on the point that Andrea just made, that this discussion was all about creating a safe space for women and for anyone else in the industry. I didn't really introduce myself, but I'm Atlyn and I'm a diversity and inclusion specialist and head of inclusion and engagement at Pepper Money. And I'm really all about kind of supporting others. So if anyone does want to kind of reach out to me, kind of with regards to advice, with regards to creating inclusive cultures, but also just in terms of career development and just being an ally, I'm open to that. I'm on LinkedIn quite a lot, but you can also email me. I will put a post up when I share the video later. So yeah, thank you all again for joining the session. It's been an absolute pleasure. The hour went by like that, and obviously is a sign of a really good conversation. So please do stay in touch, and let's kind of continue to support each other and be allies. But have a wonderful evening, everyone. And thanks again. I really do appreciate your time and all the honesty and what you shared today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a good evening. See you now.